Hi everyone, it's Miss Chambers, and today we're going to talk about natural selection, also known as survival of the fittest. And you really can't talk about natural selection without talking about this man right here, Charles Darwin. And he's got a very famous quote where he says, "It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change." And that kind of sums up his whole theory. But let's talk about him for a little bit. So he was around in the 1800s, and he's the founder of modern theory of evolution. He developed the theory of natural selection. That's really what he's most famous for. And he's probably most well known for his famous trip on the HMS Beagle, which was a ship that sailed around the world. And you can see how his voyage went here. You can see all the red arrows. He went back and forth to all different kinds of continents, but his most famous location was right here on the Galapagos Islands. And it's an island chain that has many different species of animals, and they're very well known for their tameness and how close they'll come to humans. And so he made a lot of really interesting observations there. And what he said, this is basically his theory in a nutshell, he said that if there are some species that exist or individuals that exist, I'm just going to give you a little example here. Here we have frog one, big, strong frog with really good camouflage for this pond. Here we have frog two, a little brighter green frog, maybe doesn't blend in quite as much, maybe a little smaller, a little weaker. And they live in the same pond. Let's say there's only one female. There's just one girl that they can get. And what happens here is that because this one is bigger and he's more well camouflaged, he wins a fight with this guy. And he basically gets the girlfriend. He gets the female. And so because he gets the female, he gets to mate and he gets to pass on his genes. And so what ends up happening is his genes get passed on to future generations. He is more fit for the environment. So future generations are going to look more like him. And they will be stronger, they will have better camouflage. And so over lots and lots of years, this actually changes the way a population looks. It can change an entire species. So what Darwin said, he said that there are four things that have to be true in order for his theory to work. The first one is overproduction, and basically that means too many babies. So he said that in any species, there are more offspring produced than can possibly survive. And you can see a good example of that here. These are frog eggs. Thousands of frog eggs are laid, and many of them do not survive. Many of them never turn into tadpoles. The ones that do, some of them survive, some of them don't. Some of them get eaten, some of them just never develop, some of them, who knows what happens to them. But not all of them end up surviving. And the reason for that is because of his number two point of his theory, and that is because there is variation. And variation just means differences. Differences among populations. So you can see here are three very cute puppies from the same litter. They had the same parents. One was a black lab, one was a chocolate lab. And they ended up with three puppies that look totally different. And those probably aren't the only variations that they have. They probably have variations in their intelligence, maybe in the way that their behavior. Maybe some are more aggressive, some are more docile. Maybe some have differences in the way they relate to humans. Some have differences in the way that they eat. And they probably have differences in their health also. So there are definitely differences among population. There's also competition, and competition means that there's a struggle to survive. So living things compete over resources. And because there's variation, some are better at competing than others. So he said, because of these three things, natural selection causes the fittest organisms to survive and pass down their traits. And he called this survival of the fittest. And it might be the strongest, it might be the most intelligent, it might be the ones that have the most creativity, that are the smartest, can hide the best, have the best camouflage, maybe can mate the best. Just depends on whatever traits they have. Here are some examples of natural selection. This first one is an orchid. It's a kind of flower, and it looks so much like a wasp that a wasp is like a bee, the wasp actually tries to mate with it. And obviously it can't because it's a flower, it's not a wasp. But what happens is that all the pollen gets stuck all over that wasp, that bee. And then it tries again with a new orchid to mate with a new one, and it transfers the pollen from flower to flower. This is a katydid. It's a kind of insect, and its body looks exactly like a leaf. Looks looks identical to a leaf. So that's an example of camouflage at work. And then here's an interesting example of what we call mimicry. And the coral snake up here, the red kind of yellowish white and black banding, is a warning signal to predators that it's really poisonous. It's very venomous. If it strikes you, it's got really strong venom in its teeth. And this is the very non-venomous king snake. And a king snake has very similar banding patterns. It looks a lot like it, but it's not dangerous at all. In fact, it's very very tasty if something wants to eat a snake. And so it just kind of makes use of that color in order to protect itself. So here's another example. Let's say that there's a hawk. There's mice that have two different colorations. The brighter ones stand out. So what ends up happening is the hawk eats those brighter ones because he can see it better. Future generation, there are less of the bright ones, more of the camouflage ones. And then as you go on, generation to generation, you see it start to change. And it can change the whole entire species. But natural selection doesn't just act on traits, structures. It acts also on behaviors. And so mating behavior, you're probably familiar with some birds that do like a mating dance in order to attract females, or maybe sometimes to attract males. Hunting strategies are an example of how natural selection shapes behavior, whether they hunt together in a pack or they hunt by themselves, if they hide when they hunt, different strategies like that. And all of these things lead to adaptations. And adaptations are traits that are common in a species because they help the individual to survive. So you can see here with this big cat, spotted coat for camouflage, that's an adaptation. A tail that helps to improve balance. Really strong muscles that help it to pounce. Claws that help it to grab and then also pounce on prey. Powerful jaw muscles. Eyes that helps to reflect light in such a way that it makes its vision more sharp. All of those things are examples of adaptations. And then whether or not it has these adaptations leads to something called fitness. And fitness is how well an organism can survive and reproduce. So if you have this population of beetles here, green and orange, the birds love the green ones. They can see them really easily. The orange ones, maybe they blend in a little better. Future generations look more and more orange. And so the orange has a better fitness. It's better able to survive in that environment. And then I also just kind of wanted to mention this, artificial selection. So in natural selection, nature or the environment kind of decides, or because the way the environment is created, that decides what traits are going to survive and reproduce. But in artificial selection, it's humans doing the selecting. So this is when humans choose plants and animals with traits that they like and purposely breed them to get individuals that they want. So plants are a really good example of this. When you look at cauliflower, broccoli, cabbage, all these vegetables, they all come from a similar wild mustard plant that has been selectively bred over lots and lots of time to look like what we see today. And they breed them, so that we can have different kinds of food. This is also how horse racing works. They breed the fastest horses so that they can get baby horses that are also fast and they can race and make lots of money for people. And this is also how dog breeds work. This is how dogs became so many different breeds and why they're so specialized and why certain breeds have certain characteristics, because humans have chosen those characteristics, whether they wanted a good family dog or a good protector or a good hunting dog. That's how those breeds came about. So that's a quick overview on natural selection. If you have any questions, feel free to ask your teacher.